Okay, well, why don't we get started? Again, thanks for joining us for the keynote with Jaime Levy. This is hour 12, so this is the end of our first half of 24 hours of UX. So some of you may have been going strong for the first 12 hours. If you're more on the West Coast, of the US, you might be just waking up and this could be your first session. So welcome to 24 hours of UX. This is, like we say, 24 straight hours of content brought to you with different communities that we're engaging around the world. This one is our session with our keynote session with Jaime, who happens to live in LA but being in Berlin. So we've got some global nature here and lots of folks from around the world joining us. If you're not familiar with the user interface on the right, we'll be doing some things in chat. If you have questions for Jaime, please put it in the Q&A, and Jesse and I will review those and do some upvoting, and we'll pick the most popular questions first. You can turn on subtitles. There's a little CC in a box at the bottom, and I think that's about all we need for basic housekeeping. So, Jaime, are you ready to go?
I believe so.
Okay.
Great.
So Jesse and I are going to go backstage or go behind the scenes, and you can go ahead and present your screen and take it from here.
Okay. There we are. Okay, hello everybody. Thanks for coming to my session. Yes, I'm on my way to being a expat in Berlin, but right now bouncing between Los Angeles and Berlin, and I'm happy to deliver this talk to you. What it's about is, it's a bit meta. I know there's a lot of talks about user experience, product design. You know, that's what the conference is about. But mine is a bit more of this talk about what it's like to write a book about user experience, or maybe what it's like to write a book when you're not a writer, or what it's like to even write a second edition after you've written the first edition, and what's that all about. So I want to basically tell you a lot about what the book's about, but at the same time tell you about what my experience has been like writing a book, writing both editions. So these questions at the end, I'm hoping that we'll have at least 15 minutes to go over it. So these are my two books. Well, really one book, then the second edition of it. The first one I wrote back in, I started writing it in 2013. I'd written a couple of articles, maybe a white paper, but I'd been teaching UX strategy.
Yeah, Jaime, we had a little hiccup and we lost your presentation. We lost your slides.
Okay, do you have them now?
No.
Okay,
you blanked out for a split second, and when you came back, they were gone.
Okay, window. Are we there?
There we go. Now we're back. Thank you.
Sure, let me know if that happens again. Okay, can I continue where I left off? I didn't do much. So these are the two books, and I started the first one around 2013 because I was teaching already a UX strategy course at UCLA, and there wasn't any books about UX strategy, or really, you know, this was before it was called product strategy, and I was getting hounded for everything from my templates to documentation examples and you know, my lecture notes. And so I decided I needed to really kind of put everything in one place, and wrote a proposal and shopped it around, and O'Reilly you know, gave me a book deal. And so in 2015, this book that we're seeing with the Blackback Jackal, well, both of them have it, came out. And it was really, really shocking to have that, you know, to have that experience happen. So what happened? Did it dump again? The presentation? Looks like it. I'm going to try this one more time, but I'm having a feeling that it's from the builds.
Yeah, we had that hiccup again where you just disappeared for a split second.
Yeah, I think it's every time I do a build, so I might have to do the PDF if that happens again. So what's changed between the first and the second edition that you can see right there is that I changed the subhead. Basically, I wanted the first one to really let people know that the book was about product strategy techniques, not so much a theoretical book. And the reason this happened was because, I've been tracking how people use the term UX strategy and user experience strategy on the internet for over 10 years. I have this Google alert set up. So if anybody uses the term, says anything about user experience strategy, I get an alert. So I've seen all the articles, and typically what I'm seeing are these ads looking for someone to develop their UX strategy, that they want to have a holistic UX strategy, that they want someone to guide the UX strategy in the direction of the design sprints, facilitate design thinking workshops, audio UX strategy. And I'm like, what does this have to do with UX strategy? They're talking about process. The book I wrote is about, it has a couple chapters on theory, but it's about how to de-risk value props. It's about product, how to build digital solutions and do as much as you can to make sure that it's not going to bomb when it comes to market. So I saw that the word was really more frequently, the term UX strategy is more frequently being used to describe process. And basically it was a lot about companies trying to, UX strategy was how we're going to evangelize UX at our enterprise, how we're going to, hire more people, how we're going to, what's our process going to be in terms of, making user experience so that it's more important to the company, and wasn't so much about that. And so I, meanwhile, was going on tour around the world, getting asked to speak at conferences and getting to speak to a lot of people that I wrote about in the book. And so one of the persons that I met was Alan Cooper. And this was at UX Lisbon, and I was telling him, I've got this chapter on provisional personas, and I basically use your personas to mash them up with Steve Blank's customer discovery methodology. And so, getting to meet him a couple of times actually was like a really exciting thing that made it like kind of worthwhile to spend 2 years not making any money writing the first book. I also decided, well, I need to stalk some other people that I wrote about in this book and learn how they make money. And so Alex Osterwalder was one of them. He wrote this book, Business Model Generation. I had written about how important it is for user experience designers to understand the business model and the components of it. And so I decided, and I started doing workshops all over the world while I was doing the talks on what the hell is UX strategy. And I noticed that Alex was doing a workshop in San Francisco, and that he was charging like $5,000 to go to this 2-day thing. And I was like, wow, I want to do that. How do you do that? I can't afford to go to his thing. So I emailed his people and said, hey, can I be like an intern or take names at the door and hand out stickers? And they said yes. So I got to watch and observe, an author and, a business strategist who I really respected. And I learned a lot from that experience, and I decided to, for the second edition, extend on that and really explain the business model canvas so that people, in line with a business case, so that people could really, understand how to use it when they're doing, product strategy. And then who turns up at the 2-day workshop for Alex Osterwalder, but Steve Blank. And so of course I have to go up to him and have a photo taken of him holding the first edition of my book. You can see there I'm looking really, really nervous. And he's someone who really inspired me. Eric Ries, when he wrote Lean Startup, basically riffed on the 4 steps to the epiphany, and just popularized, this concept of, running experiments, starting with the problem first, and doing user research in a way that's structured, that's run as an experiment. So I was really excited to meet him, and I decided to keep in contact with him as well. And when it came time to ask for testimonials for the second book, I decided to just go buck wild and write anybody I could find their email address for, and that includes Steve Blank. And so if you buy the second book, you'll see that the first little paragraph of praise is from Steve Blank. So the message to any potential authors out there is to stalk all your heroes. That included Tim O'Reilly. So Tim was in Los Angeles, and he was doing a talk in downtown LA for his book called WTF, What's the Future and why it's up to us. And I didn't want to pay to go backstage either, but I really needed to talk to him about something important, and that was why O'Reilly didn't ever allow their authors to do audibles. I understood that technically it's hard to do an audible if you have lots of diagrams or programming, but my book is mostly theory and how-tos, and I felt, I'm someone who has trouble reading books. For some of my business strategy books, I had to pay someone to read them to me because there wasn't audiobooks, and some of this is ADD, and some of it's just it's really business books that can be boring. And so I really wanted an audible, and so I stalked him, and I climbed under one of the cubicle walls and found him and showed him that my book was at the Amazon bookstore and that he needed to take it seriously. Anyway, he thought I was a psychopath, but he had this picture taken of us, and he tweeted it, and he remembered. And so when it came time, when they asked me to do the second edition, I said, no. Only, though, I'll do it if you give me the audible rights. And so that was what inspired me to go ahead and do the second book and to really push the storytelling. And so while I was in Los Angeles for the last 3 weeks, I was actually in a studio recording the audible. It'll be out in July. The hard copy and the Kindle are out now. But my friend who is a big, audible narrator told me about this studio that, a lot of famous people recorded. Hey, it's LA. So I decided, and I had to pay for it, that I was going to do it since it would probably be my only audible ever. So I was going to go for it. So I decided to hire the studio, and they brought in this guy who looks just like Peter Frampton. Now, if you're over 45, you might know who that is. It's a joke. He's an old rock star, but he's still around. But he was the engineer. Well, I sat in a booth reading my book and discovering not only does it have over 15 typos, but that I have problems saying the word risk, pronouncing the word K. So the audible's done. I finished it last week, and it was a really interesting process of, when you want to read a book like your heroes like Malcolm Gladwell, you don't just walk into the studio reading your own book. And that's what I did. So if you get the audible, you'll notice by the 4th chapter, I finally really understood the concept of enunciation and tempo. And it was a really wonderful experience. And I can't wait for it to come out. So let's talk about the first book. How did I do that? Well, I attempted, after doing the research and reading the books, to write the book at home in my office, where I've been doing strategy since 2010. I never had trouble with getting work done. But then all of a sudden, when it came time to writing the book, it was like I almost wanted to do the laundry, even if it wasn't dirty, rather than sit down and write a book. So I knew I needed to find a place that I could really lock myself into, but it needed to be a place where I was surrounded by other people doing something as harder. And so that was when I settled on writing the book at the Caltech Library, which is open to the public from during business hours. So I went over there religiously 5 days a week, and the goal every time I went there was to write a section of the book. And until I did, I wasn't allowed to leave, and I listened to the same 2 records over and over, one by Kurt Weill and one by Blonde Redhead. It was like this weird OCD thing. I had to eat the same thing. I had to always sit in this chair, or I'd go crazy if someone was in the chair. I would sit as near to them and just like give them stink eye until they left. But it was a great experience, having that year and a half sitting in the same place, seeing that, God, there's other people writing in this library doing stuff like this. No one talked to each other, but you can ignore that, please. I guess you won't see it. I really enjoyed the process of doing research and writing inside a library, even if it was just, mostly sitting at that laptop using EduRoam. I would have liked to write it in public libraries like in LA, in New York. I tried, but the problem is we have this horrible homeless problem in the United States. They don't give homeless people places to do anything. So they go to the library, and so they lock the bathrooms. And, that's like my favorite thing to do every hour is drink water and go to the bathroom. So that was how I ended up at Caltech. When it came time to do the second book, I needed a new library, and I also needed a new country. And I decided that Berlin was definitely the city I wanted to write it in. And after watching Wings of Desire 20 times, particularly the first 15 minutes, where Wim focuses on this gorgeous modernist library, known in shorthand as the Stabby, I decided this was it. And so I had to learn the whole routine of how to go in the library, how to sneak food in, how to, you have to check your bags here. And, I speak very little German, but I found my special seat there and hooked up to their EduRoam and was in the middle of writing the book. Everything was going pretty good until, guess what? They shut the library because there was this pandemic. So let's talk about how I wrote the book. When I started writing, it was like this big Google Doc with little pieces here or there that was pasted in from lectures. It was a mess. I would think like, oh, I want to say something about competitive research. And then I would scooch, to the fourth chapter, and I would forget what I was going to say. So I started reaching out to other authors, and Jeff Gotthelf, who wrote Lean UX, among other things, told me that he lived and died by this application that came out of from England called Scrivener, I'm not sure. But anyway, it's a fantastic tool for long form writing, scripts, manuscripts, etc. But basically it's great because you have this table of contents on the left side, and you can create like chapters and then sections and then subsections between these really easily. And export it. And so for the first book, I just love this, and I would highly recommend it. I think it costs $40 to buy. But that was how I wrote the book. For the second book now, I had the manuscript, and I had to export them out of some weird PDF and pull them back into Google Docs, clean them up. And so it was really about breaking them into chapters and then first going through the chapters and saying, this is going to be updated, this paragraph's going to be updated, this whole section's going to be updated, this needs a new business case. But I ended up writing it in Google Docs. And this was extremely important, as you'll see in a moment, because I ended up having to bring in an editor to write with me, because without going to the library, I lacked the discipline to really write the book. I needed a way to make it more fun and social. So the book, we had it broken out by chapters, and it was, I'll introduce you to Jessica in a second, but she was a student of mine who took both my courses at USC, just insanely smart. And she was 25 years old, researcher. No, she has a degree in computer science, but I brought her in to help me research as we were writing the chapters. I would hit like a paragraph and I'd be like, is that correct? And she could go and look at it, and, or we would write stuff together. And it was a lot of fun. And the strangest thing is I was listening to, a podcast by some famous authors, co-authors, and they were talking about how they co-wrote their book using Zoom and Google Docs before the pandemic. So I sort of discovered that process on my own. Another thing was, while we were in the midst of writing it, I was thinking, how about some recording some of these sessions, and whether we'll want to look back at them, or maybe if the book does well, other people will too. But let's go ahead and start recording them. And so I actually made a playlist of 10 sessions. Some of them are specifically us writing a chapter. Some of us are going over notes from the experts, like, not tearing the book apart. Some of them are us discussing artwork with the art directors, bringing in SMEs. But if you want to check out, over 20 hours of content and really see us sit there sometimes for 40 minutes trying to get a paragraph right, they're there. So we really wanted to make the process transparent and share some of the people who really helped with the book as well. And you just type Jaime Levy playlist UX strategy, and it'll come up on YouTube, and you can learn more. So I would record them, and it was a lot of fun, and then we would just post them. So one of the sessions featured my good friend Brandon Griffin, who's in LA. We were showing him the plates, the 4 tenets of UX strategy, and saying, people didn't really get that it was plates that were sitting on my dining table in Los Angeles. I'm about to sneeze, excuse me. All right, so it's gonna come again. All right, so allergies. And so he was like, yeah, these are god awful. They're not cool at all. You need to redo these plates. So we had him up there on one of these sessions, and, we were talking about what could be the new look and feel. And he came up with this, bringing in chess pieces, and we changed one of the tenets. The one on the bottom right was killer UX. And, I guess because I'm a California girl and would talk about killer waves, that just didn't convey what it meant. Killer UX didn't mean, we want to kill people. It meant we want the UX to be frictionless, so that, to design for conversion, so that people can intuitively know what to do without hitting walls. But these are the 4 tenets of UX strategy, and now we have some new artwork in the 2nd edition. So if you look at the table of contents, the one on the left is the 1st edition, the one on the right is the 2nd edition. You'll see that they look pretty similar, even though the book's at least a 35% rewrite. I just really learned a lot while I was out there touring and going and doing workshops and doing training and doing more product strategy, and everything got touched. We tightened it. We removed stuff that we didn't believe in anymore, and then I updated some entire sections. For instance, in the first book, I talked about doing a form of field research called conducting guerrilla user research. This idea, the whole book's about doing, lean or lightweight forms of product strategy, for designers or strategists who don't have a budget, or their stakeholders or their, team leads don't want them to be doing any strategy. The product owners like, get out of my sandbox. So we wanted to teach, I wanted to teach people how to do it with the first book, just without any, having to have a lab, not having, without being able to do your recruiting. And and just basically, some people call it cafe research, but it's not. It's not like you're going to the cafe and recruiting there. We just use the cafe because it's a great place to do interviews where people aren't feeling like they're lab rats. It's a relaxed environment. It's not like going to, a co-working space or, focus group or, it just has a very intimate feel. And so I wanted to teach how to do, user research, taking over, a cafe where you can get away from the people running it and hang out there for 7 hours, ideally with the stakeholder there, taking notes, listening to these interviews. But when the second book, I was like, okay, something happened. I needed to all of a sudden pivot really hard and teach people how to do, user research in a methodical way, as a structured experiment, but online. And this was, of course, related to having to rewrite this section during the pandemic. Another thing I really wanted was new case studies. With the first book, I focused, probably because that's where my head was at. It was, early on with the lean startup craze. And so most of the case studies were startups that I worked with, and it was showcasing the different experiments that I did with them. For the second book, I didn't want to do that. I wanted the book to be more global. I didn't want it to just be about California startups. I wanted it to be about companies all over the world. I wanted it to be about, mid-sized startups and enterprises. And so I decided, this one app that I used for my car insurance, I just loved. And it's called MetroMile. It's this insurance where you pay like $30 a month and then you just pay per mile, which is perfect for someone like me who, works from home, doesn't drive around. So I wrote, I didn't do this for the first book. I felt like I was a journalist or something. And I wrote these ridiculously long letters. You never do it like this. Dear Matt, I hope it's okay to write you this ridiculously long letter, but I'd really like to profile your company and your amazing work in my book. And I wrote all kinds of companies. I wrote Patagonia. I wrote, a bunch of different ones. And some people were interested. But Matt was like, yeah, let's do this. I'll share with you some of the. And so that's what happened. So MetroMile became the start-off story. The book starts off with my car accident. It looks like I dropped the presentation again.
Yep.
Well, I'm not doing anything, by the way. It's technical.
Yeah, probably just a little hiccup in the connection. Yeah, not a big deal.
Let's just not sweat it. Hopefully that wasn't gone too long. It's still not there.
No, again, literally you're just gone for a split second.
Perfect. So I'm catching it. Okay, so I'm going to put it in front of the screen so I'll notice if it happens again. So you'll see even like this book starts off like, last year I was in a bad mood after a Sunday afternoon meeting with a colleague who needed help planning a workshop. Here, let me read it like it's audible. Maybe it was because I disdained working on weekends. Maybe it was because commuting from the east side to the west side in Los Angeles is always a horrible idea. Or maybe it was because the thought of leading a glorified brainstorming session for C-suite execs just never sits well with me. Whatever the reasons, my mood got even worse when the car behind me hit mine so hard that my half-eaten foil-wrapped burrito flew from my back seat and into my windshield. And it goes on to talking about how MetroMile saved the day, and I had to file a claim using their app instead of calling in, and it just like took me through the process. And it's just like, it was just so amazing to just kind of, deconstruct the story, with a narrative, but also really show the screens and talk about their claims funnel and their AVA artificial intelligence for making the process simplistic. And so that was just like a lot of fun getting to talk to Matt like about, behind the scenes, how they figured a lot of stuff out. So another business case came surprisingly in a way that was unexpected. I was in Berlin a couple of years ago speaking at UX Camp, doing a talk about digital transformation. And this gentleman comes up to me and says, "Hey, we're in the middle of a digital transformation." And I said, "Oh yeah, I might be writing about that in my second edition," because I thought I was at that point. That chapter got tossed out. But he said, "We were doing a lot of really interesting experiments at Volkswagen. Would you be interested?" And I said, "Hells yeah." So I got to go to Wolfsburg and check out their factory, and I got to hang out with Sebastian, and he's pointing at one of the WeShare posters there, and they were doing this incredible, they're the business innovation lab based in Berlin, doing the coolest experiments. Volkswagen's a massive enterprise, and I had a lot of lunches, a lot of hangouts with him. And I ended up documenting this experiment where they were testing out the concept of, having basically, a car becoming this thing that's a service. And with that car comes free car washing, let's say, the free delivery of your dry cleaning to your trunk, all kinds of crazy stuff. So I decided to feature the landing page in German because I wanted the readers to not focus on what it says, but on the elements. And so I had the whole landing page and talked about their experiment, talked about how they did their advertising, and even got a slide from the deck that they presented to the stakeholders at Volkswagen. On the left, you see the Facebook ad that they ran. And then in the middle, we see the landing page. And then what they're really testing the conversion on is if people download the app. And what they were trying to learn would be for people in rural areas more interested in this idea of free car washes or car washes as part of owning or leasing a Volkswagen as city areas. And so you can see the duration of their experiment, the costs, and then the conversions. And so if you look at the rate, you can see that it was a much higher rate, 9.64%, which is really good for a landing page. So getting to document that, an enterprise, a global enterprise that they do experiments for the book was something I was really excited about doing. And I talk about it. I created another tool for my book. There's a toolkit I'll mention in a bit that's called the UX Strategy Toolkit. It's free, whether you buy the book or not. And I created a new tool called the User Research Experiment Design Tool. And it looks like this, and basically it forces people to really think through the process of the experiment, putting in the value prop, what kind of experiment, is it showing a prototype, is it a landing page, otherwise known as a smoke test, what details, how are you going to validate it, what's the hypothesis, what is your success criteria, and really trying to explain, what you need to do to do product strategy techniques to de-risk a value prop, in a structured way so that you could collect empirical evidence. So what stayed in the book for sure was the personal anecdotes. This book, it was a good opportunity for me to talk about my family because I come from a family of entrepreneurs. My father, he bailed his full-time job at the age of 38 and opened up a hot dog stand. So that story stayed. So did the one about my mom, who didn't go to college, who opened up a tennis shop that was wildly successful. And, having my parents, start businesses and seeing them succeed and fail, was a huge part of my upbringing and definitely inspired me to be, to have an experimental mindset from the very beginning. So those stayed, and then I needed some more because I tossed out some chapters, wanted a new one. So I decided for the chapter about the Volkswagen case study, I would talk about my experience getting my Carmen Ghia. And I just took excerpts from my diary from the early, mid 80s, and they're literally written how I talked, like a total Valley girl. Like, today didn't suck like usual. After school, Stacy and I drove around in her new black VW Rabbit with the top down, blasting music. She totally got me into the Cure and Joy division. I didn't have time to study for my Spanish test tonight. Whatever. So, there's these anecdotes that open up every chapter, and some of them have lessons learned that are really directly related to the product strategy, and some are just really more existential, and this was one of those. So then another thing was that when I'm writing my books, I'm constantly fine-tuning them by doing the lectures early on and having my students do the homework assignments so I could see what I get back, and also documenting their process. So when I was at UCLA for the first edition, I documented 2 students, Vita and Nina, creating provisional personas and talking about how they did customer discovery. And even the guerrilla user research in the cafe, there's Ina showing the prototype to a user. Now, when it came time to do the second book, I updated the provisional personas, and I was also now teaching at USC. And in the middle of the semester, the class went from a classroom to online. And I just had some remarkable students in this particular group. You can see Jessica in the very top left next to me, and below her Nico, and they were documented along with several other students. Their works in the book. So being a professor is a huge part of being a practitioner. I often hire the students after they graduate, and I document their work. I learn from seeing, these are graduate data science students. They're no dummies. So I get to see, what works, what doesn't work really early on, and that really helps me with the book. So when the pandemic hit, we had to pivot right away. This was the timeline. I decided that this would be the anecdote for chapter 8, the new chapter on conducting, online user research in a structured way. And so I just basically highlight the things that happened, like March 2nd, 2020, I gave a lecture on how to go do user research field study, but then 2 days later, they declare that, California's a state of emergency. And then 2 days later, Stanford says they're going online. 3 days later, Donald Trump says it's not so bad, we're gonna be okay. The day after that, my students' prototypes are done. They're ready to do their in-person interviews. The day after that, coronavirus is confirmed as a pandemic. The day after that, they close USC and they say that we're going online. So I tell my students it's time to stay home and we need to take these studies online. And I split tested everything. I said, if some of you are going to do Zoom, some Skype, some recruiting this way, some recruiting that way, some using Calendly, some doing it by hand. We had about 15 different tools together, trying out really to see what was the most effective way to do recruiting, calendaring, running the studies, documenting the studies, everything. And so that really what became that chapter. We learned a lot, and it was, it was a crazy process. It was a crazy time. I'm sure you all remember. I kept some tweets in there because they're just so remarkable. But the class ended with what was shocking, which was that their finding briefs came in and they were able to validate their hypotheses about the problem statement, about the value proposition, and the business model. So I learned a lot from that event, and used the book, that chapter to teach people that how to do online research, as an experiment, and what tools to use, and how to keep the cost down, but the learning's up. And I broke it down into the phases and wrote out the whole flow, everything down to the analysis, to even creating a tool on how, to help people generate, the right questions. Because I noticed in the first book, and always seeing people ask questions that were related to usability and really not testing, who cares if someone can or can't use your product if they don't even want it to begin with. It's just, when you're doing product strategy, you really need to focus on the value proposition. So I'm on it, guys, don't worry. And so let's see if it comes up. Maybe not. 1, 2, 3. Is it gonna go? Isn't that great? You see how calm I am? Let's do this again. Share screen, Windows, this, share. I know it's gonna work this time. So, I'm really stoked about this tool because it worked. The questions now, you can see in section 6, it's like it forces people to say, okay, if I'm saying that the customer segment would be more likely to do this, what are the questions? You could backwards engineer the right questions to be asked about business model and features and so forth. So I'm going to sort of jam through this, but I put in intros, I help with the setup. All these are in the spreadsheet, so we're going to give you the links to download everything. There's a recruitment tool with some Easter eggs on the left of all my favorite musicians who we wanted to just use dummy information and how to do recruiting. And there's Nico using his prototype and his layout to show how to do that and how to get validation. So if you want to download the toolkit, just go to userexperiencestrategy.com. It's free, of course. You just need to put in an email address so I can send you the link to the Google Workbook that has 5 or 6 tools in it now, as you can see. And so another big thing that changed is that I've been slowly moving myself to Berlin. I'm here with my son right now. He's here for the summer with me. But it's really been a wonderful experience getting to write and live in 2 countries and see what that experience is like. I really quite enjoyed it. So I'm just going to end with how the book starts, which is with the quote by Robert Frost. 2 roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled, and that has made all the difference. And what that quote means is that, sometimes it's easy to take, the main road. It's easy to say, okay, I'm going to stay with my job. I don't want to take any risks, or I'm going to just design the prototype this way. I don't want to do variations because, let's just do one. Or, I'm just going to stay in LA because moving to the other side of the world is too complicated. But what you risk by not doing those things is that you never find out what could happen. And that's what I learned from doing this book, is that I want to take the road less traveled. Thank you so much. I look forward to your questions.
Great. Thanks, Jamie. I'll give you a second to catch your breath. So we have a couple questions here in the Q&A. I think some you may have already answered, but we'll go through them anyway, and you might be able to just recap them a little bit.
Should I stop sharing or leave it alone?
Nah, leave this up because that has the extra information that I put in the chat. But so this is good. So what are the differences between version 1 and 2 of the book, or what new things will we find in the new version of the book, which you've talked about, but maybe just a quick summary.
I think I just spent 45 minutes talking about it. Nothing more to add.
So,
New business cases, updated techniques, new tools for the toolkit, fine-tune techniques, more researched, more focus on, what's the difference between UX strategy and product strategy and how I came to that. It's just really a lot more fine-tuned. When you have I spent 2 years writing the first one and 2 years writing the second one, so you can imagine that those updates, there was a lot put into them.
Good. Thank you for the recap. And so one follow-up question was about the names of the tools that you mentioned during the second part of the talk. So tell us a little bit more about some of the tools.
Sure thing. Good question. Well, if you download the toolkit, you'll see that there's a tool for, so there's about 8 techniques or 7 techniques in the book. And so I'm a big spreadsheet fan. So it's obviously a Google workbook for full spreadsheets. So there's it's a competitive matrix. And then there's the one for doing recruiting. There's one for doing the experiments. There's one for doing, my God, I think I showed most of them. One for writing the script. About 6 different tools in there. And it's free. Check it out. If you don't like it, throw it in the trash.
Great. Thanks. Okay, so here's one at a different angle. So any suggestions for somebody writing a master's thesis?
Finish it as fast as possible. Can they be more specific?
They were, just suggestions for somebody in that boat, because it sounds similar to writing a book, but maybe master's thesis is a little bit different than writing a book. I'm not sure.
I don't know. My master thesis was 2 pages. I turned it in with a floppy disk. So it really depends. If you're trying to, I'm not sure what they're asking. If they're asking to write, to use Scrivener or to use Google Docs, if they're talking about the process, if they're talking about the subject, I don't know. How would finish it? Get out of school. It's a waste of time. Go work. Reason.
Perfect answer in my book. Thank you.
Speaking of, are you still giving classes, sort of workshop type classes for people? I thought that came across my screen recently.
Yeah,
can you tell us about
halfway
that?
through, I did my. I'm in the middle of my 6-week online master classes, and they all sold out. There's 5 lectures that people were able to also sign up for. And they're going great. And what I don't want to do any more online classes this year. This might be my last online event, in fact, because I want to go back out in the real world. So the first conference I'm speaking at's in Estonia. It's World Usability Day in November. And I'm going to be touring all over Europe in October, November, to any place that it won't kill people to get people together. And they'll hit some other cities, and then hopefully some conferences will pay my way so I can do workshops, worldwide. I also do them on site in corporations when they bring me in. But if you live in a big city and you work for an agency, or you know someone that might want to host it in exchange for a few free seats, hit me up on LinkedIn, and my workshop partner and I can work with the company, or at least start figuring out who wants me to come to their city and put it on the tour list.
You touched on digital transformation earlier and mentioned that you dropped it from the book. Can you tell us why you made that decision? And because it's, you just mentioned corporations, it's a big topic.
Yeah, it was heartbreaking. I researched it. I did talks about it. I took 2 jobs doing digital transformation initiatives. And then when Jessica got to chapter 10 and tried to write it with Volkswagen as a case study, it was so theoretical, and there's no one size fits all for digital transformation. Everywhere it's different. There's about 30 books on the subject. And even though it's so relevant to product strategy, it just, we tried really hard to get it in there. But when we sent it out there was 10 reviewers of the book, some that I picked, some that O'Reilly picked, and all 10 said, this chapter needs to go out. It doesn't fit in the book. We were just like, all right, we just lost 30 pages and, 2 months of work. But, that's what happened to it. It just, it was more about like what happened at, Volkswagen after, Dieselgate, and how, it's like, you can talk about how digital transformation is about, optimizing the processes, and it's not just about digitizing a company, but like digital transformation at Netflix, it's very different than digital transformation at Volkswagen or at a healthcare company. So that was really the problem, is we just couldn't make something that taught people how to do it, certainly in, 20, 25 pages.
Mm-hmm. Keith, from the queue, anything new?
One more in the queue that came early on. Why did you need a new country for writing the second book?
Let's go back in time. Where was I living when I started writing the first book? So 2019. I'm living in a country where I don't understand the people there and how they believe what they believe. After spending a lot of time here in a liberal democracy, and sure, there's racists and neo-Nazis and, and all kinds of, idiots. But to be in the States, with the new election looming that wasn't looking so great, many times with a president that I found, sorry, all you Republicans, I found just absolutely offensive. I was embarrassed to have my son having to, see what happened, with the line, and I just couldn't take it. I needed to turn off that noise. I just couldn't have the news. I couldn't have people talking about it. And I just needed a place that I could just enjoy life and hear. You go outside, man, no one's talking about tech. They're like drinking beer right now and talking about life.
There's a difference. There's a difference for sure. I mean, when I'll tell you a little story just for, who cares? But I used to go to the dentist in California, and he, with my mouth open and his hands down my throat, he'd ask me what my favorite stock picks were and what was in my portfolio. And I come here to Geneva, and it's completely different. Everybody's talking about humanitarian aid and other things like that. So, it really does matter. And that kind of brings me to my next question: is have you noticed a difference? Because this is a global conference, right? We're not just North American focused. We've got people from all over the planet watching your talk right now, and we've had them all day, and we're going to have it all night. What have you noticed since moving to Europe? Did you get a chance to do any consulting in companies? Have you seen different ways of working and cultures? And do you feel like most of the principles in your book apply in this environment?
So, well, the truth is I'm not working for any European companies. I'm going to have my visa in a couple of weeks. So I've only been documenting them. And I've also been running workshops all over Europe for the last 5 years. So I would do a workshop. And of course, if I hit something where it was like, how does this work with B2B? Or how does this work with, ethical concerns in Europe? I would just be like, going to the notes, and all of that was integrated into the second book. I probably didn't stress how important to me it moved from this California Silicon Valley obsessed book to something global, something applicable for people that are at slow-moving enterprises. The vibe here, I'm also, my experience in Europe is very much around Berlin and Munich. I spent a lot of time in those two cities, and also Poland. There's it's blowing up over in Estonia and Poland, and with prototypers and design. My workshops and master classes are packed full of Polish people. They are just jamming. And then in Berlin, there's a startup scene, but, I meet the people here are so smart. The product strategists, it's just inspiring. It's not competitive. It's not about jobs. People aren't jumping jobs so much. They're really trying to work at the company and be the best, but they're typically environments like in Germany where it's bureaucratic and politics are tough. This, Jesse, you've been here longer than me. So I really wanted, I stress a lot that it's about collaboration and transparency and working with others from the very beginning and not stepping on toes and being a douchebag. That way it just doesn't work for informing strategy.
Thank you for that answer.
Don't be a douchebag, come on.
Yeah, we're all trying not to be douchebags.
Be a nice person.
Yes, exactly. Okay. Well, I think, Keith, we're coming to the top of the hour. I would like to thank personally, Jaime, from the bottom of my heart. Thank you for being here with us today. I want to tell everybody to go buy that second edition of the book. It's obviously quite modified from the first version. So even if you've read the first version, like I have, my earmarked copy, get the new one. It's on Amazon. Keith has posted those links up here on the page. Jaime, we're going to, spread the word about your courses and your Audible book coming up soon. So people look out for that as well, in case you like to hear books as opposed to read them.
Definitely.
Highly recommend.
Anyone that leaves a review for my book, especially a good one on Amazon, I'll give you a 1-to-1 15-minute session and talk about anything you want. Just message me and let me know you left a review, because they're extremely helpful for me.
Bravo. Yeah.
But thank you, everybody, for the great questions. And good luck on your master thesis. Just get it done. And enjoy the process and listen to Kurt Weill. That's my advice.
Yeah, music helps. Good.
Thank you, Keith and Jesse. You guys are great.
Cheers. You're most welcome, Jaime. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Okay, so onward with 24 hours of UX. Ciao, Berlin. Bye-bye, Jaime.
Bye. Take care, everyone.